Hey there, everyone. How's it going? Just wanted to stop by and wish you a happy winter solstice and share a couple of reflections and ideas that have been coming up for me. These energies, and I didn't quite know it. The first part of my life, I didn't have the vocabulary or the words to explain, but through my studies and my personal growth and self-healing journey, I've began to find the words and the vocabulary and the context to share my experience with people in hopes to validate and normalize whatever you're going through in your personal journey and your experience of growth and expansion. And for me, this has been creating this space, this platform on Facebook called Mind Heart Space, as an offering to this sacred space that we call a self, the constructs that we have, the way that we relate to ourselves and the world, and to really offer a alternative to the way that many of us were taught to see ourselves, and really like the level of empowerment, these ways, the ways that we often inherited seeing ourselves, and to ask questions about what's possible in this space of the self, which is the place in which your life is unfolding moment to moment. So it's kind of a really special place. And we dismiss it, we devalue it, we even reject it, dislike it. We let other people's judgments about it determine our sense of well-being and safety and joy in the world. And I just know, as I don't know I don't know about you, but you can share, hopefully, if you stop by. If you do, leave a hashtag live or a hashtag replay if you see it on the replay. This year I'm really commitment, the big C word, to this platform as a place to empower others to be fully free in their sense of self. Not in a selfish, narcissistic way at all, but in a way that's empowering and inspirational and uplifting for you and others, in a way that energizes what you have to share, instead of perhaps being a drain. You know, a lot of times, well, before I get too far ahead of myself, if you stop by today, leave an emoji, please, or a comment, so I know that you were here. Comments, questions, I appreciate them all. So the last couple of days I've been posting about the astrology. Although I am not a professional astrologer, I've been studying astrology for over 30 years. I've always been so interested in it as a system of knowing. And a lot of people, or some people, don't necessarily acknowledge astrology or think somehow it's in conflict with science. But there are many different systems of knowledge, and they aren't mutually exclusive. It's not like if you believe in one, you can't access the other. My belief is that systems of knowledge that have lasted thousands and thousands of years do so because they have some value in them for people, else they wouldn't still be around, like astrology. And so a lot of this astrology for me encompasses archetypes, life energies that we're working through all the time as human beings in the sacred space of the self. And Venus as a symbol of what we value, our sense of beauty and aesthetics. And this has been largely related to the divine feminine. And when I say divine feminine, I'm not talking about the female gender, because we all have feminine and masculinity within us. They're energies. And yesterday I posted about the idea that as we step into this, darkest part of the year, we celebrate the light that's within, the rebirth of the sun, and the promise of the light and all that means to us. And it's so interesting because it's so embedded, like say in Christianity, but it's also central to the study of science, light, and as an element of our 3D experience, and what is light and what does it contain, and how it allows us to see the world and observe the world around us and ourselves in the world. And so anyhow, this idea that this feminine energy has often been undervalued or not playing a central role in the recipe of this Trinity, which is how our consciousness works. And it's not just in a Christian sense of the story of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Those three central energies are parts of the psyche that we that a lot of times have been projected outward into literal manifestations. Not to say that they didn't exist or they weren't real, but they're also a representation of our relationship to God as an embodied life energy. Like we are life energy embodied, and the principles of what it means to be life energy and embodied don't pertain to any tradition or any religion or any institution. They are our birthright. And any time that this life force is manipulated or controlled, or there's force around it about how we get to show up, how we get to be, it reduces the truth of who we are, as the whole message of Christmas is unconditional love, right? The ability to give freely without condition. And if it has condition, then it's not love at all. But a lot of us have been trained in the opposite. Hey, how's it going? If you stop by, say hi. I can't see who's here, so it's just helps if you pop it in the box. Anyhow, I was just talking about Christmas, and Christmas stirs up a lot of emotion for people around, like, perfection and desire and love and receiving and giving, like these essential things to our human soul that aren't related to necessarily a holiday at all, but our human essence, like, of life. And so every single one of us is facing our own challenges, our own learning curves, our own learning edge, whatever you want to call it. And part of my journey has been coming to understanding that the way to empower myself and others most efficiently and greatly and effectively is to share practices and tools for increasing self-awareness. And by expanding our self-awareness, we can bring a greater sense of mastery over our own operating system, our human operating system, because, to be honest, nobody really, maybe many few people probably, ever received an owner's manual. Like how does this all work together? And so through my study for the last, 30 years now, has been to look at not just the physical body and how it functions, the materialistic view of our humanity, the grossest perspective, but also through our energetic body, our spiritual body. This is the Trinity also, the mind, body, and the spirit. It's the same thing that keeps showing up in many traditions. And so after a while, when you stop listening and you start really observing, you begin to notice these patterns in your own humanity and the humanity of others. And for me, I had pulled back the lens and began to build a container for myself that I was never given. I was never given a container to hold my own emotion, to be my own witness, to be my own, to have the ability to be my own foundation, my own strength, my own courage, my own confidence and capabilities in the world. And this has all been given discovered through my journey. And when this work is being done, there's many ways to approach this work. I've gathered many modalities along my way as I've been doing this work for myself and others that I coach, that we gather fundamental ideas and beliefs and stories around this construct of the self that are only a small, tiny bit of our experience. We have something occur in our life, and depending on the nervous systems of the people around us, those stories get programmed in our bodies through, hey, how's it going? Through the chemical and sensory experience in our body, and it gets imprinted, in our nervous system. And then those stories we begin to identify with as being who we are as a personality. But it's not necessarily the extent of who we are. It's just one version. So as we begin to do this clearing, we began to not only clear our thoughts, but do the physical reprogramming. And so, as a reading teacher, I had an opportunity to be involved in these neuroplasticity studies about the brain and how your brain actually recondenses information in order to learn. And so, this was very different, right, than the historical idea that, your brain is just the way it is and then it just stays that way. Science has found that the brain is rewiring itself all the time, and that we can do that intentionally, and that these constructs that seem like our personality are a habit, and they've been imprinted in our biology, but they're not necessarily need to be permanent. But we get attached to them, right? We get really attached to them because they seem familiar and they feel like love. But they're kind of limiting, right? Especially when we find ourselves hitting up against the same restrictions, like our ego is created to protect us. So we say we want to go somewhere and then it pulls us right back because it's like, oh, wait a minute, I don't recognize that version of myself. And so we, if we're going to do this work, if we're going to really empower ourselves, we have to come to terms with the mechanism that this biological mechanism that was given to us to protect us, but has ended up sometimes just very large degree limiting us. And so this Christmas, this winter solstice, as we enter into this space, I invite you to think about, the idea of this season as being holy, right? This holy season, and the word whole, and the idea that it's related to sacred, and the idea that sacred is related to the idea of health and well-being, being fully in possession of who you are in every aspect, and beginning to master your own life and to be a conscious co-creator more and more and more. And that is the greatest gift that any of us could give ourselves and others. And I think that over the last 2 years, we've been put in such a strange time warp, cultural warp, all around the idea of health, immunity, our immune system, its own knowledge and wisdom to protect itself. And, the idea that that's like our bodies are wise. And we have lots of knowledge that we might not be accessing all the time. And so when you begin a regular self-awareness practice, that capability, that container grows and grows and grows. And you become empowered at levels that you may have never even imagined were possible. I know that's happened for me. A lot of people throughout my life have looked at my life and observed my life and the choices I've made. And everyone has an opinion, about what you do and why you're doing it. But one of the most often comments that I get is, "You're really strong," And it's like, I don't feel that I'm really strong. I feel that, I guess, had the ability to always connect to my heart. And in doing that, it might look like I'm being strong, but I just am actually listening to that voice within. And I'd like to take credit for it, but I don't know if I can really do that. It's just this internal wisdom and knowing that I've always been able to rest upon. And, that's really what I'm sharing with everyone else, is that you have that wisdom, you have that knowledge within. But we get trained out of it and taught not to trust it, But, if the message of Christmas isn't anything, it's like, to have faith and trust in that light, that spark, that inner child that you brought to this planet, which is you, right? That is another way of reading the metaphor of the Christ child. And, as a literature major, everything's a metaphor. And as a mystic and a visionary, this is the way information is passed on through these layered images that have sensory information, emotion, and that's why myths have been so powerful, right? They contain wisdom and information. that are passed on from generation to generation. And some of these myths and images have to be rewritten, have to be released. And some of them, this have to be understood for what they really were, right? Instead of being appropriated to control people or make them feel helpless, or somehow that the power is outside. And so anyways, I just wanted to stop by. I kind of rambled today. I titled this live Embodying the Dream. Embodying the Dream. And I called it that because like I said, we have this I, which is the social construct, the things that, the mental concepts that we've been given about who we are, versus the I, which is our real experience, our emotional, our sensory information that is not based on concepts, that is not based on labels. And it has to do with our embodied lived experience. And if we can bring these two together in balance and begin to let go of these concepts versus the real lived experience, and balance these and have them work in harmony, the masculine and the feminine working together. Again, I'm not talking about gender. I'm talking about these energies of knowing with the intuition versus the mind, right? The structure and the flow. And there has to be a balance for us to be in mastery of our consciousness, like the chariot, right? You have to have both wheels going in the same direction, or you just go in circles, right? And so this new year, usually I take some time out right after Christmas to do the 12 days of Christmas, and I'm thinking about doing that again. So I'm going to do it much shorter though, just like maybe 15 minutes a day, and looking at each month. So each day is a month out of the year to create it for yourself, and looking at what the overall theme of this new year that you would like to co-create with yourself in this lifetime. And then I'm just going to sign off by saying that there are still spots left in my Rituals for the Sacred Self, which is a year-long mentorship, which is going to be starting this January. And so if you'd like to join, I put the link in the description box of this live. You can check it out. If you have any questions, you can reach out to me, and I would love to answer your questions about what we're going to do and the kind of things that you can expect. But I'll just say that it was designed through me, by me, to foster and facilitate the most important relationship, and not in a selfish way, but in an empowering way, in a very empowering way with yourself. Because the relationship with you have with yourself is the mirror of every other relationship out in the world. And I'll say more about that later. I'm going to cut it short. I mean, it's not really short. It's actually 23 minutes. But I'll stop by again before the holiday to say hello and share some more ideas. If you're here, thank you so much for stopping by and saying hi. I wish you and yours a very merry holiday season, whatever you celebrate. Good to see you. Sending you my love and good cheer. And I'll see you real soon. Until next time, please remember what a valuable treasure you are, and bye for now.